full bars on everybody's internet this morning. This is awesome. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Dad Day Wednesday. Today, we are going to look at the freight recession. The what? Is there really a freight recession? What?
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Oh man, that conversation before the show started just fired me up. I don't know. So, just for everybody watching and listening, we were talking about obviously the Port of Oakland. We just kind of picked it up, and I had said something, and I'd love all your thoughts and opinions on it too, because we all four of us agree that this is what happened. So, have you ever noticed when there's a news report about something happening, they pick the stupidest, ugliest, like dumbest person to represent whatever it is on the news? And I can tell you, coming from Canada, they pick people that literally still live in igloos 24/7, 365 to talk about the politics in Canada. And I just find that, if we can't, and the reason I say it is because I saw a report this morning on the news up here about the Port of Oakland, and they chose a driver that, as I said before I got in there, makes ZZ Top's beard look like a Hitler mustache. It just looked like he hasn't showered in a year and a half, to represent the logistics and supply chain community and what's happening in California. And I just think, guys, it's. I mean, as much as we've laughed about it off air, it's brutal. It really is brutal, because we have drivers in seats that literally have MBAs that just choose to drive. This is what they choose to do. And, I met one of my son's friends who we went to high school with at a grocery store the other day. Just happened to come around the corner and see him. And I said, well, what are you up to? He says, well, I'm driving truck now. I said, oh, are you really? I said, where? He just kind of filled me in on a bit of his roots. And I said, you know what? Good for you. Because he's, a 22-year-old kid, 23-year-old kid. And I go, good for you. Like, we need more good people in this. And we started really having an actual in-depth conversation at the grocery store. And when we finished speaking, no joke, there was about 4 people around us that literally just started tuning into our conversation. And they were like, wow, you really praised that young man for being a truck driver. I said, well, absolutely. I said, do you see what you're holding in your hand? He goes, yeah. I go, wouldn't be here without him. And it like, their eyes went, you ever have a conversation with somebody, and then when they get it, it's like you see in their eyes, like something changes. They have that. It was incredible. And they're like, well, I never thought of it like that. I said, well, try and think of it like that next time you go and cut one off, or next time one's having a problem backing up somewhere. Like let's do our everything we can do as citizens to help supply chains move. So get out of their way. Maybe get out of your car and redirect them, so this poor guy's not doing a 27-point turn in traffic. Like something, but just honor the people that help our society move. Not even move forward, just move in daily practice. And anyways, I know that's totally off topic of what we're talking about today, but I just thought it was important to share.
Well, look how look where they've come from, right? Come from heroes during the pandemic, essential workers risking their lives, keeping all the shelves full, to I sent them a video of people yesterday, almost forgotten people, and now being back to being treated with complete disrespect.
Yeah, I'm just amazed. Yeah, I'm just amazed how many people out there are like deer in the headlights. They really don't get it. They just think it happens from osmosis or something like that. I don't know. It's just like the product grew out of someone's yard or something like that. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, I can tell you, so recently, obviously, with everything that's going on with me, my wife and I pretty much daily are traveling to Toronto, which is there's a hospital, Princess Margaret Hospital, and they're the top 4 in the world for cancer treatment. But it's like an hour and a half from our house. And we go from country, where your biggest traffic jam is the tractor pulling the plow that's going down the road, to like concrete jungle where cars are everywhere, people are crossing streets, and it's like your senses are on overload trying to just like look at it, right? And I'll tell you, it's as if most people, when they get in their car or when they get on their bike or when they start walking, there's nobody else around. I'm here and that's it. Like just the feeling. And again, the feeling I get, right, is that it's all about me. And, you know, if you need to merge because you're about to miss your exit because you might not know where you're going, don't get me wrong, there are the arseholes that pull right into front but like, it's just that common courtesy. And we saw it happening, almost a year ago now, where that common courtesy started really going downhill, right? We've been in the pandemic for a while. It's like, okay, it's become the norm to be in the pandemic. And everybody just goes back to what was. And it's brutal because if you drive anywhere, any one of you that drive, just watch what cars do around transport trucks. Like, just watch. I mean, we're talking almost coming to a complete stop, and this one guy wants to get just in front of the truck instead of going behind the truck and then moving the lane, decides to speed up, go in front of the truck, slam on his brakes, and then cut over and then go. It's like no concept to the stopping distance.
None.
What do they have? 44,000 pounds of product in their truck, so they're stop. You know, like, oh, now you got me raving, boys.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a problem. I've seen cars in the fast lane trying to get to an exit, so they race in front of the truck and cut them off, and you hear the truck blasting. You know, it's just like they don't stop on a dime, folks. I mean, it takes several hundred feet for them to, you know, on a 44K load, it takes hundreds of feet where you may, you know, at 60 miles an hour, you'll be able to stop pretty quickly in a car. Ain't happening with a truck, you know, and people just fail to realize that. It's ridiculous. But the
worst is the brake check, right? The brake check every. That's why most truckers have got dash cams these days, so the police can grab these jerks that for some reason, and it's usually because they get held up. Like, people are so impatient they'll get held up.
It's just road rage. It's people
and just cut in front and jam their brakes on.
It's pure stupidity. It's just pure stupidity. Yeah. Plain and simple.
I go on. If I went on a 2,000-mile trip, I'd probably have it happen at least once in a trip.
So you pretty much you're having it happen at least once every 2 days.
Yeah, 500, probably once every 4 to 5 days on average. It happens.
Yeah, it's right, 400 to 500 a day. Yeah,
but that's the northeast, right? I think they're particularly bad in the northeast. Traffic congestion, bad roads, potholes that you lose yourself in. I think people are pretty frustrated with a lot of things.
Agreed.
But it is disgusting. And then before we get into our topic, it is disgusting because, you know, for all you shippers out there and receivers and all that, like, you know, it starts there, I think, and then it kind of works backwards. You know, like, I mean, the amount of people that have posted lately where drivers have taken pictures of signs, it's like, are you kidding me? Yeah. Are you kidding me? Where do you think your product? You can have the best product on the planet if you don't have a truck to get it where it needs to go. If it's not a digital download, hell no. Let me rephrase that, because digital downloads need friggin' trucks to deliver to goddamn computers you download it on. So let's talk like.
So Dan, we did. I think we covered this on a show before. I'll repeat it just quickly in case those that missed it. But we did some text analytics on in-cab messaging between the mobile communication device and office. Right? Remember the word waiting came up as a strong predictor of accidents and heartbreak events. And what it really spoke to was just the utter frustration that drivers feel. The corollary data point was that they quit at about a 60% higher rate before an hour and a half elapsed versus after an hour and a half elapsed, because hour and a half you get your detention pay. So if you don't get your detention pay in that first hour and 29 minutes, you are quitting at a 60% higher rate than an hour and 31 minutes. It's the frustration.
When it comes to data, my friend, I have to tell you, you are the mastermind in this industry. Like hands down. I mean, we're talking text data now. Not even lame data for analytics. Like it's unreal. I can't wait to sit down with you at the conference for like an hour and a half and just pick your brain on stage. It's going to be awesome.
Oh yeah.
You know, we didn't know it'd be predictive, right? Part of the fun of analytics is just throwing a whole lot of stuff on the wall and see what sticks.
Yes.
And then you got to dig into it and say, well, what does it mean? Is it real? We did some predictive models at a large gasoline company, and the highest risk driver was a driver that was hazmat. Yes, no. So it was a binary field in the database. Hazmat qualified, yes, no. And we said, that doesn't make sense. How could your how could your worst drivers, your worst, most probable to have an accident driver be hazmat drivers? Because that doesn't make sense. It's counterintuitive. And we went back and presented the results, and they said, oh, no, that's just a field we use so that we can't dispatch non-hazmat drivers on hazmat loads. It's not real data. But it came back predictive, right? So even though data can be very insightful and predictive, you've actually got to reality check it with, because some people put really bad data in the wrong fields in a database. And that's what you've got to be very careful of with data, is to make sure your data is clean and actually a representative of what your business is doing.
I remember my old IT guy used to say, my old IT guy, the company I worked for, the IT guy there used to say all the time, Dan, it's garbage in, garbage out. Like if you put garbage into your system, you will produce garbage on your reports. He goes, it's so critical. And I don't think very many people pay close attention to that. And, you know, obviously with things we have going in the mix now, the data set inside of it is critical. Like it's crazy.
You know, where
how you can get
the most predictive data, Dan, is data that's in between data sets. So sometimes, you know, the data of a DOT physical on its own doesn't tell you much, like the you know, the MMYY DDD, however you put it together. It doesn't tell you a lot, but when you derive the days between when a DOT physical is and when a driver had their last accident or their last training course or their last home time, suddenly that data point that you derive, which is days between two dates, actually becomes highly predictive. Like, so your drivers least likely to quit have the fewest days between prior jobs. Of course, they're workers, they're busy. But when you start to get long days between prior jobs, you start to get interesting data points that suggest there's something not right here. But days between prior jobs is not in your database, and it's not in your MVR history. You've actually got to.
So it's more context to the data, which then
you got to write some code to calculate the days between. It's like radius of operation. When I did some work for Tech Coal up in Canada, I went into one of the big coal mines in the Elk Valley, and I when I go, I always just sit outside the front gate and watch shifts start and change. I did the same in truck companies. You'd learn a lot about how a company runs at shift start and end. And I'd see the 4 or 5 guys roll in a pickup, and I'd think, wow, I wonder where they've come from. And it's a 12-hour shift. And so first thing I did was look at home zip to mine zip and calculated the miles between the two in the database. And I found guys driving 6 hours to work each day, to and from. But they were sharing the driving between the 4 or 5 guys. So their elapsed time awake is probably in the order of 18 hours a day. Wow. So it's not the fact that they were on duty 12 hours, it's that they were awake. Now, they were probably napping in the pickup. If you think about risk, it's not so much the risk on the job. It's like that big accident involving, was it Kevin Hart that got injured in that bus crash on the bus in Pennsylvania? You know, the driver.
I believe it was, because he was just he was in an accident where he broke his back, and there was a bunch of different things. Or he did. Yeah, I think it was.
So the driver in that was late at night, I think, but he'd commuted a long distance by car to get to work before he started driving. And it's really about time on duty. It's about how long you've been awake. And one of the strongest predictors I find in terms of, you know, severe accidents is how far away from work you live, because that tells you how long you're awake each day. And you'll be surprised that most drivers are at risk of falling asleep at the wheel on the commute to and from work, not when they're at work. Because when you're at work, you've got to drive the truck. When you get in a car, you just steer it, right? And there's a big difference between driving and steering, because when you steer a vehicle, you can disconnect really easily. And when you relax, because you don't have all your safety requirements on when you get in a car, the probability of falling asleep goes through the roof. So that's one of the big things I found in 24/7 operations, is the distance from the workplace is a really strong predictor of workplace health and safety accidents.
You know, it's interesting that came up today. On the weekend, I was speaking with a buddy of mine who's one of the highest chiefs at the Toronto airport for fire and safety. And he has obviously the job of a firefighter is you come in for 24-hour shifts, you do 8 or 10 shifts a month, right? And so he has people on his crew that are literally 6 hours away, 5 hours away, like almost Sudbury kind of time frame. And I said, are you kidding me? I go, wow. He goes, yeah, but he comes in 8 times a month. He goes, it's not a big deal, right?
Right.
I said, well, he goes, but he comes in the night before and stays at his brother's place in Toronto.
There you go. Yep.
I said, well, why would he do that? Why wouldn't he just, he goes, because he goes, Dan, what he found was because you're on a 24-hour shift, you sometimes sleep, you sometimes don't, especially at the airport. It's mostly like paramedic calls, like that kind of stuff. He says, like, there were times when the guy wouldn't sleep for 36 hours and then he'd have to get in his truck and drive home, and he almost went off the road. Right. So it's actually a data point that we very rarely think of, right? Like you think, I used to drive an hour and a half to and from work each day. So an hour and a half there, an hour and a half home.
Yeah.
That was 3 hours in the car every day. Yeah. And I actually primed myself because I took the Zig Ziglar approach in Automobile University. So on my way into work, I would listen to audiobooks and training courses and all. So I'd get to work fired up. But I'll tell you, getting home.
On the way home, it's the window like, down, the air conditioning blasting, and the music, and the music loud
coming in the window, like the sun coming in the window. It's just like that. You got the AC going, but you got the sun that's heating you up, and it's just like,
oh no.
Like, yeah.
So you want to?
Good morning, Scott.
Quick trick.
We got a bunch of. So good morning, Lisa. Yes, that's right. It's a machine. Dean, the data machine. Love it. Love it. Good morning. Late but here. Pivot Day. Scott, good morning, my man. So,
morning,
Dean.
Scott. All right.
Freight recession. What's going on?
Day-to-day Wednesday. There were lots of talk. It was kind of a bit of a non-event, right? It was it set the whole freight media world on fire probably three months ago. Maybe everybody's talking about it. Suddenly we got lots of call because someone read about a story that got everybody thinking, and of course it just never materialized. But the more important point was that the underlying data defied that headline anyway. The data didn't support any notion that the trucking industry was in a freight recession. Sure, we had too many trucks in the industry. We had an oversupplied market. We still do. Lots of carriers entered the industry, and there's some bleeding off of capacity going on right now. Demand, though, underlying demand is still pretty solid. And I did some data. We talked about it on our show yesterday, but one of the themes that I've been seeing in our spot market and contract data is 2022 looks a lot like 2018 from a demand perspective. So you remember 2018? It was back in 2018 when it happened. People were saying that was the strongest demand the truckload industry had seen in a decade. Right, so 18 was like a breakout year. We had changes in the tax code, industrial stimulus, oil prices rallied, a lot of investment in the industrial economy. We're coming off the back of 2 Cat 5 hurricanes in late 17. A lot of building industry activity, a lot of because of accelerated depreciation in the tax changes, a lot of forward ordering of trucks in Q3 of 18. It was a really big year. Spot rates were higher than contract all the way through July. And it was primarily a flatbed-driven rate rally. That's what really drove it, because it was such a strong industrial economy. And the more we look at our data this week, it looks a lot like 2018 did from both a rate and a demand perspective. In fact, rates, when I look at flatbed, dry van, and reefer line haul rates, they're only 2 cents per mile below 2018 levels right now. Oh. So, in fact, dry van rates this week were identical to 2018 levels. So from a demand perspective, the volume of freight moving looks and feels a lot like 2018. And I've got some data points to support that. You saw some data come out yesterday on new single family and multifamily homes. Home starts were down about 8%. The bottom line there is that we're still building 13% more homes than June of 2018. So last month, we built 115,000 more homes than we did in June of 2018. So we're still building more homes than a lot of people realize. The other data point I looked at is steel production. Steel kind of peaks in March, April each year, the volume of net tons being produced, because that leads into building and construction season over the summer. So steel production is down. No surprise there. It's down 4%. So it's down 8% year to date versus last year, right? So we've got less steel because 21 was such a big year. But we're only 4% down year to date compared to 2018, right? So we're not far off 2018. And then farm equipment, so this is the big heavy machinery. It's the two-wheel drive, four-wheel drive tractors, 40, 100 horsepower, flatbed stuff, right through to the four-wheel drive broadacre farm tractors and combines. When you look at the total number of sales of ag equipment, we are identical with the 5-year average, but up 15% compared to 2018. So we've got more machinery moving. And that's so when we look at our data points in sort of the spot market, which is a precursor of where the contract market's going from a rate perspective, we see demand, a lot of demand signals in terms of the volume of freight, whether it be load post, spot market activity, loads moved, a lot of similarities with 2018. You can see that in some of our charts. The reason why rates are dropping, though, is supply, which is the number of trucks in the market, looks like 2019. Those numbers look a lot like 2019, which was how bad of a year for carriers. We saw record numbers of bankruptcy. Some of the really big names exited the industry. Seeing a little bit of that now. There's a couple of companies closed their doors in the last month. Maybe that's where we're heading. I think a lot of people still miss the fact carriers are coming off one of their best years ever last year. JB Hunt's earnings call yesterday was stellar. So large truckload carriers are still doing really, really well. And I think some of the Q2 earnings calls will support what we're hearing anecdotally, and that is carriers are doing really well because contract rates, 90% of the freight moves on contract rates, are at all-time high levels, even though they're starting to decrease. So if you think about where the market sits, I would summarize it as this. Demand looks like 2018 did, which was a really good year, but fell away towards the end of the year. Supply looks a lot like 2019 did, which was not so good, and that's why rates are heading down rather than going up at the moment. So that's sort of my data point for today. And the summary point here is that when I look at the average of dry van, reefer, and flatbed rates today, they are 35 cents per mile higher than the average in pre-pandemic years. So even though even though rates are dropping, we're coming off such a ridiculously high 2021 where we set all sorts of records. So comparing this year to last year is really problematic because your comps just don't look good. But if you look at where we would normally be, we're 35 cents a mile higher on average. So, excluding fuel.
Yes, yeah. I've got a couple of questions regarding that data because I think it'd be really valuable for everybody watching and listening. So in 2019, when you and I met, we were coming off obviously 2018, and the word in the asset side community was you can't base any of what your teeter-totter or your reports on 2018. Like go back to 2017, it was this anomaly year, right?
Right.
It was the year where finally asset companies were getting paid what they deserved to make a profit.
Yep.
So from what you just said, rates are still higher than what it was in 2018.
Yep.
But yet there's still the complaining, there's still the rumbling in the background where rates are dropping, this is BS.
Right.
Secondly, to point to that would be if freight demand is that of 2018, when we look at the data for 2018 and the way prices went up, because everybody puts it towards ELD and carriers being their time on the road being reduced, there's no bunks, there's no sleeper split, there's none of that. My understanding is, in speaking to a lot of the bigger companies, they've been on ELD for over 2 years at that point, getting ready for what it was.
Like if you look at so
like if you look at like the highlights, the challengers, all these big corporations, especially in Canada, they've been on ELD in preparation because Canada came after for ELD after the US, but transporter. Like I remember speaking to one guy there. I go, "How has this impacted you?" He goes, "Dan, we've been on ELD for almost 3 years now. Like we've been doing electronic logs for almost 3 years." So my question then becomes, is demand that we saw, did the capacity crunch have anything to do with the perceived higher demand? Or is it just like, this is the demand, and it's kind of based on the data that you get is based on a manufacturing level or loads moved level?
It's both. It's a range of things, right? So I look at demand. So we look at data points that tell you directionally where the market's going. I couldn't tell you how many loads of steel were moved in our network last week, right? So I look for data points, whether it be produce or the volume of meat going into cold stores or the volume of flowers coming into Miami. We can look at all those data points. You can never connect a pallet of flowers with a truck. Right? Those data points don't exist. But when you see, and I'll use Valentine's Day as a good example, when you see 35 jumbos arriving every day with flowers from Ecuador and Colombia, you can see spot rates in the reefer market take off the next day, right? So what you're looking for are data points that tell you directionally where the market's headed. So some of those data points that I showed you there support that. We're still seeing pretty strong, even though demand is cooling, right? So relative to last year, we're still seeing demand levels higher than 2018. In fact, some of the freight-weighted heavy data points are about equal to, like when you look at manufacturing and mining data from the Bureau of the Census Bureau, we're about equal to 2018 levels. So it's really a combination of things. I just look at data points that support directionally where we're going. So it's like used truck prices, new truck orders, right? So whether they are more long-term forecasting data points, what you're looking for, it's not like, we're selling more tractors, therefore I can get a better rate for my drop deck, with my big 5280, case machine today. No, it's not how it works. But if you wanted to know that imports were up in Baltimore, or it's March and that's peak import season for heavy machinery from Europe, you would automatically say, well, I can probably get better rates now out of Baltimore to Quebec for my drop deck than I could have in February. So what you're looking for are data points to support, I think, and I'd love Jeff's perspective on this, because as a carrier, what I'm looking for is, where do I put my equipment? Where do I position my assets? What lanes do I run? Like, it's like, cherries are coming online in the Pacific Northwest out of the Yakima Valley. If I'm in Seattle, I'm going to deadhead straight over the mountain and load back to San Francisco. If it's, what's another data point? Could be peaches, could be strawberry season in February coming out of Lakeland, Florida, right? You're going to get a really good rate there. So there's these windows of time that you kind of look for based on the seasonality of what you're hauling.
And Dean, to your point about record numbers, I mean, I just seen a report on Monday, Martin Transport financial performance during the second quarter of this year. I mean, they're saying they're 42% higher year over year revenue.
Yeah. Werner presented a similar story a little while ago. That's the whole notion that the industry is collapsing is just complete rubbish. The industry, most of the carriers are doing really well. Even small carriers are doing pretty well. But there is a small sliver, right, that really struggled. And these are the guys that pay double for a used truck. Insurance policies in the $25,000 to $30,000 per powered unit range. And this is why some of these guys are protesting in California, because they're new entrants to the industry and their policy precludes them from becoming independent and getting their own authority. Right? If you wanted to go from being leased on to a large shipper or carrier in California right now, you're probably going to need 30 grand, a lazy 30 grand laying around to get your own authority and buy insurance. And that's why they're protesting. It's really hard. I've got no other option. So, so carriers are having a really good year, DJ, and that's why I think you're not seeing the exodus from the industry that we did in 2019. That said,
2019 they weren't prepared for what they are prepared for now. Yeah.
Right, but you've got to remember that last year was extraordinary because spot rates were at record highs, but diesel prices were really low relative to where they are today. I think in the 240 range they were averaging. But when you look at the spread between spot and diesel, it was an incredibly profitable 6 to 8 months last year, last 6 to 8 months of last year. That really set carriers up for a strong base this year. And the bigger carriers found that the same. So what we are seeing, though, is it's interesting. In 2019, when I look at the two big auction houses, 2019, we had about 1,100 thereabouts trucks hit the auction market in June of 2019 when bankruptcies were spiking. This month, we saw about 300, give or take. But it was up 60% from May. So there are more trucks hitting the auction blocks. And I think auction inventory is a really good leading indicator of where the market's at, because if you're going out of business quickly, the auction place is a good place to recoup some of your equity.
Correct.
But those numbers are nowhere near 2019. Sorry.
Yeah, and Dean, to your point, I don't know if you said it last week or the week prior with your friend who parked their trucks because of the high price of fuel. When you put that into the equation too, I mean, that's major disruption as well. I mean, they can't afford to run your trucks.
Yeah. Yep. I think a lot of guys have sort of said this notion that I'd rather sit in the lounge chair and go broke than be out in a truck stop, right? Going broke.
Well, I mean, and not only that, if you're going to sit in the lounge chair, you'll go broke, and it'll take you more time to go broke than go and spending an extra $1,000 a day on fuel that you don't have the money to recoup, right? And speaking of that, Tyler's actually got a great question. He says,
he does.
How can we compare rates to 2018 with diesel costs being much higher than ever before?
Well, two separate questions. One is rates and one is margin. One is profit margin, right? So, good question. I don't have my spreadsheet back to 2018, but I could do that for next week. What I could do is, if you can give me a minute, I can quickly pull up a year-over-year comparison. I do know that this time a year ago, you were making about 35 cents a mile gross margin. This year, you're losing about 30 cents gross margin, 30 cents a mile. So it's been a big swing.
Did you say a minute?
I need...
Just kidding. No.
Give them a minute countdown.
You know what I really should have done is I really should have created one of those Jeopardies where
Yes.
It's a good question.
Final Jeopardy, guys.
As soon as Dean said
it's a good question.
Like, oh my God, I could use the 59-second countdown. I got to use it somehow.
If you could, I will have the answer to that pretty quick. I'll just need to multitask here and talk.
And while you find that answer, Dean, another story I just seen was about Pro Logistics and some of their numbers for Q2 of this year compared to last year. I mean, their occupancy rate is 97.6% right now. Q2 this year.
Pro Logistics
compared to last year was 96%. They actually even added 2.3 million square feet of storage, and it's still at 97. And their rent almost went up $100 on top of that, and still.
Yeah, but now, hey, DJ, crazy. Now take into consideration the 964 million square feet that they occupy. Also, I've read that over the next 10 years, they're going to need, get this, another billion square feet of warehouse capacity. Yeah. I mean, just think of that number.
That's crazy.
That is insane. And to your point, DJ, not so long ago, Prologix went out to their customers when we were in the thick of things with the port disruptions and said, hey, we can't take any more inventory in. We're busting at the seams, So again, that added major disruption to what was going on at the time. Congestion. They had no place to put it. They had no places to put the containers, and they're still struggling, to your point, at 97%. And now we're moving into peaks. Now we're moving into peak season. What are they going to do is the next biggest question.
Didn't Prologix just buy, I don't know if it was Prologix, who just bought a company that had like 2.7 million square feet, and they just purchased it.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
I think it's like Freight 3. Nah, it's not Prologix, but it's another one. I just read the report like 2-3 weeks ago where they said they just like doubled their square footage with one purchase, and as the time of purchase, they were already full.
They were full.
But I mean, I know what you're talking about. Like even we've had Greg on the show, right? So Greg runs Flair Flexible Packaging. Flair Flexible Packaging, fairly large corporation. 2020 to 2021, they got an extra 1.3 million square feet of warehouse space outside of their facility. So with 3PL providers or warehouse providers, that's one company, 1.3 million square feet. So you start doing the math with the multiple millions of companies across North America. That, I mean, if each one company needed 5,000 square feet, you're bulldozing farm fields and building buildings, and they're full before the building even starts being constructed. You know what I mean? You almost got to work around freight to construct the building. Crazy. What was that data center buddy that you were looking for?
I got a data point for Tyler. I think Tyler might be asking about all-in rates, because when he talks about comparing rates to 2018, I think he might be talking about the fuel surcharge in addition, because back in 2018 at this time, the fuel surcharge was 33 cents a mile. Today it's about 70. So that means all-in rates were much higher last year. So Tyler, I'm just talking about line haul rates, excluding the fuel surcharge. So when I put it into my operating spreadsheet for an owner-operator small fleet running 110,000 miles a year, financed, et cetera, drawing a $70,000 wage, spot rates are about $1.95 in July of 18, same as today. Diesel in June of 18 was $3.22 versus $5.38 today, or something like that. The net is that I was about break even this time in July of 2018 at $1.95 because rates were cooling. Today, so compared to break even in 18, I'm losing 40 cents a mile at the moment. Now,
hey, Dean.
Yep.
Dean, carriers, in order to be profitable, have to be around that 25% on revenue, right? Compared to 2018 today, what is the difference in the percentage?
Yeah, so we were at 2018, we were about 32%. So diesel is about 32% of revenue today. 25% is your long-term target. So if you can keep diesel at 25% of fuel, we covered this before, diesel at 25% of revenue, you'll be profitable long-term in a small fleet scenario. 2020 and 2018, and even back to 2017, it was about 24%, 23 to 24%.
And we're right now at
32, 33%. Yeah.
Okay, 33%.
So not sustainable.
And what was 2019? 2019 was, I think it was like 29, 28%, wasn't it? When we saw
2019 it got up to it's peaked at about 29% when bankruptcies peaked. That was about a sort of an annual average. So that's the number you got to watch very carefully. It's not sustainable, but it is if you've got some reserves, money in the bank, you've got some good mix of contract and spot rates, you've got good partners. I know guys that are getting by now, even with diesel at high prices, because they've got clever about it. I think there's a lot of guys that have figured out that, the spot market, if you don't know your costs, the spot market can eat you alive, because your rate might not recover. If you don't have a fuel recapture program, you'll really struggle to get enough cents per mile to pay your fuel bill each month, which can be very high when you're putting, it costed, was it $1,600 for me to fill my 2 tanks on the weekend in my Peterbilt. So, it costs, and you're doing that every 2 days, a long haul truck, probably every 2 to 3 days. It's a lot of cash. So your cash flow really takes a hit if you're not getting enough revenue. And especially if you're holding, if you're not getting paid quickly, you've got to pay for that fuel at the pump. You might be able to, have a little bit of credit, but mostly you're paying for it at the pump, and then you've got to get paid at some point. Even if it's 7 days, you've still got a cash flow issue you've got to deal with.
Well, and then you look at some of the customers that pay the smaller fleets in 35, 40, 60 days. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking $3,000 a week and you don't get paid for a month,
right,
like you're 12 G's just in fuel before anything else, before plates, before maintenance, before driver wages, before buildings, before rent, before hydro, before computer technology, phone, like all of it. That's a huge expense, and then you don't get paid because they're like, oh, well, the invoice never got processed, so give me another 15, 20 days. Now you're up to $26,000 in expenses before you get paid your first load.
Dan, did I share the data point with my Nova Scotia friend that's putting a new engine in? Did I share that last week?
No.
So it kind of blew me away. One of the things I said last year, I did a couple of articles on this. This is a good time to buy a truck. And I said, absolutely. It's always a great time to buy a truck if you know what you're doing. Right? If you've got good business partners, you know your operating costs, you've got a niche, you found your niche and you're going to service the heck out of it. And you've got really good business partners that are helping you. And one of the things I said last year was make sure you put money away for the rainy day. So these good times won't last. We said it over and over and over. Well, so my good friend Bobby runs out of Sydney, Nova Scotia. He runs a Peterbilt with a triaxle drop deck, step deck with, I think they're 255, 15, 75 tires. They're really low profile tires, right? So we can haul really high over-dimensional loads, but not be over height. If you get my drift. So anyway, so it's a 4-year-old truck with a big red motor, big Cummins engine, had a cracked head on the way home 2 weeks ago. And they'll tend to do that when they get hot and worn. So he had to get towed. He was loaded with machinery out of Baltimore, had to get towed back to home. The repair bill for a remanned engine. So this is not a new Cummins engine. This is a remanned engine, and he thought he'd put a new clutch in it at the same time. So remanned engine, clutch, and the cost of the tow came to what, do you think? Wild guess.
26,000.
85. 85,000.
85?
85 grand. Now, you've got to add the opportunity cost of being off the road for 6 weeks for an owner-operator.
6 weeks.
So, yeah. So, and then I get this. The remanned engine turned up last week, damaged, and they've had to send it back.
So pretty much in one fell swoop, he's lost his entire, probably almost 2 years of profit.
And he owed that much on the truck, so he's had to refinance.
Wow.
So this is the cost of running a truck. It is nothing like what people think. So even though I had one of my colleagues say rates are ridiculously high and shouldn't be that high, and I said you've got no idea what it costs to run a truck. Operating costs have gone up about 25 cents per mile in the last year alone because of inflation, and this exercise of this clutch and engine just brought home to me how expensive it is to run a truck and how much money you need to put aside, because in-frame rebuilds on a lot of these older trucks that people have been buying in the last year, they're going to run you 35, 40 grand in a heartbeat. And you're going to have to do that at probably some of these newer trucks, maybe 500,000 miles. I'm still at 750 on my Caterpillar. It'll run to 1 million miles without any problem whatsoever. Because it doesn't have all the emission crap on it, but because all the emission stuff is just killing these engines, that they're just getting too hot and overheating, and they just don't last. That's the downside of the technology. It's costing a lot more to run. So the cost. So this is the when you're talking about buying capacity, there's a lot to it, because in the rate has to be a lot of money to cover what it really costs to run a truck, and I think a lot of carriers really don't have a good handle on that, because you really just hope you'll never break down and the engine won't fail on you, and you think that rainy day won't come. Well, it came in February, didn't, when Russia invaded the Ukraine, and suddenly diesel went through the roof and fuel surcharge went up, and one of the more bizarre things, spot rates go down when diesel goes up at the rate that it's been doing. It'll be interesting to see, with diesel down 38 cents in the last month, Jeff, if in fact spot rates start to level out. They flattened this week a little bit, which is interesting. So,
well, we got the Ontario government came back and said we're going to do a 12-cent per liter discount and everything, and it's funny because now our fuel is like $1.68 a liter, $1.68 a liter, which comes to I think we're down in that $5, $5.50 per gallon. We were up over $9 a little while ago. Yeah. Oh yeah. We were like, some places was $2.15, $2.20 a liter, and I think it's 3.8. Yeah. Like you times it by 3.8 to get to a gallon. So like we were $9, $10, $11 a gallon up in Ontario. Like it was friggin' brutal. And if this goes back to all of you as logistics professionals, like I truly believe you need to understand how your partners are profitable. Because again, if this is a real partnership, it's an obligation of every party to make sure everyone's profitable. Because the last thing you want to do is lock a supplier in, you have a great relationship, but they're not getting paid what they need to sustain their company.
Right.
And then they have one or two of these issues that Dean just talked about, and they're out of business. And not only are they out of business, now you're in the process of trying to, I keep hearing DJ trying to get in here, but I don't see him. Then you're in the process of, now you got to find a new supplier. You got to help build them up to the capacity and to get to the point where you work. Is like it's long term, make less, earn more. Right? Yeah. And as a carrier, as a broker, especially. Oh, there's DJ. So DJ, your internet looks unstable, but it's just gone green again. So you're good.
My internet's terrible.
As a carrier,
I'm losing it over here.
Yeah, you're back though. You're all green. As a broker, if you're making $200 a load and you want long-term stability, maybe give the supplier $50 a load. Yeah. Like you're still at the 150. But your suppliers mean so much more to the long-term business and your long-term growth. Exactly. And I don't, well, don't get me wrong. Some brokers and logistics professionals are greedy and they want as much profit as possible. I understand that. But I think some just don't pay attention to, or have never really dove into, are my suppliers profitable? Because that's a big question.
You have to have that conversation with them. It's collaboration. What are your needs? I know what my needs are. Let's talk. Where do you need to be? Where do you need to be? It's those type of questions and concerns that should be present in all kind of relationships, especially if you're looking for long term. If you don't have them, you're looking at short term, and it's a waste of money. Like, one thing that I learned a long time ago, it's a lot easier to keep a client on board than to find a replacement.
Yeah. And you know what, Jeff, to that point, I also think what you just said there, I had it in my head. I also think if you don't think about it and you don't pay attention to it, it's just as bad as trying to keep somebody down. I really do. I think it's very, very, very important that we start as professionals. Like Dean's talked about many times, leave something for the next guy.
Yeah.
Yes. Right? Leave something on the table for the next guy, because it's all great that you're eating and you buy a Ferrari, but if you're leaving a wake of devastation and destruction in your path because you're not paying people what they should be to be profitable, to be true partners, then I think, and maybe unintentionally, maybe as you're listening to this, you're going, damn, I've never really sat down with my suppliers and said, how do we do this for the next 15 years?
Yeah.
As opposed to just today. What are loads picking up today? No. How are we going to grow this business together over the next 10, 15 years? What do we need to do? What would it look like for you? And they might say, listen, every year I want a 3% increase. Give me a fuel surcharge instead of a flat rate. Let's negotiate those deals now. Put this into effect. Dean just talked about how contracted rates are kind of, they kind of follow or tail the spot market. Yep. And we've seen over the last week with Lane of the Day, over the last 2 days, finally we're seeing spot market rates way higher than contracted rate, or way lower than contracted rates, which means contracted rates are going to come down, right, eventually. But what if you're that person that says, hey, listen, spot rates are dropping, this is dropping, let's put a plan together to keep you profitable, keep me profitable, and keep my customer profitable. And here's another thought. Bring your customer in on that call.
Absolutely.
Open it up. Transparency. Yes. Mr. Customer, we're going to have a candid conversation about money. I take a 12% margin. That's my margin. It's cost plus. And have the conversation. Bring everybody in so that the three minds, if you will, can combine and create your next level productivity. And then once you do that, go about being of service to the customer, as opposed to this wheeling and dealing, or whatever you want to put it in. Sorry, I rambled, but you guys know what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And,
but you nailed it.
The thing is with the contracted rates, right? Especially in today's market and the volatility that we're seeing. So what I tell my customers is listen, you need to be where you need to be. I'll get there, but it's not sustainable. And in the very near future, we're going to revisit these rates, because if there's a tremendous, uptick in fuel, or the rates start going through the roof, we're going to have that conversation. Because, if you're looking for sustainability and you want that capacity and you want to build long-term business relationships, these are the type of, questions, concerns that have to be addressed. And
100%.
you'll have them in your corral for a long time. But if you burn them, you're going to lose more than what you know right now. Guaranteed.
Yeah, and I think, again, unintentionally, not having these conversations, you're setting your suppliers up to be burned. Right? The way I look at it, guys, is I look at it like this. If you work for a company and you have not asked the question, what's the invoice cost? What does it cost for us to invoice an order? I don't think you're doing what you should be doing for your company. And the reason I say that is this. I know companies, their invoice cost is $200. $200 to put an invoice in. And I say, guys, time out. That means if you book any load under $200, you're not profitable. You're losing money. So what do we know? Like, how do you know what actually makes your company money? It's great that you get a commission check and every month you're like, oh boy, here we go. But if your company's not making money, that's not a long-term solution. It's very short-sighted. And the same thing is, hey, what does it really cost you to move this load?
Yeah.
Mr. or Mrs. Supplier. And if they're like, well, I don't know, then, well, let's figure it out. Because the last thing I want to do is get into this a year later and you go bankrupt because we think we're making money. We're not. And I've told you guys the story 100 times. When I was at Transcend Freight Systems, I asked our operator, how do you know you're making money? He goes, well, I got money in the bank. That's like your big vision, your big sign, the big aha moment. The sky opens up, the light comes down. Oh my God, I got $2 in the bank. I'm making money. Like, well, think about it. Dean, your friend from Nova Scotia, he's making money. When a $95,000 or an $85,000 bill hits, plus lost opportunity costs. So if you look at that, and you're calling it $1,000 a day, $5,000 a week minimum, in order to move a truck. So it's 6 weeks of losing $5,000 a week, plus the $85,000. That's more than most people make in 2 years.
Yeah, but it's more than
later,
6 weeks.
Gone.
Yeah, it's more than 6 weeks because the reman that came in is damaged. So it was 6 weeks to do that. Now they got to send it back, and then they have to get
and it's
another
not even back yet. So it could be whatever.
It's more than 6 weeks.
$5,000 a week.
Yeah, it's more than 6 weeks.
That's the whole thing stuff, though. Oh man, I did that with the training one time.
But think about it. Of another transport company had to transport that. Of all the things not to care for, an engine on a truck when you're forklifting stuff around and putting in it defies logic.
Well, you know what, Dean? That brings up another huge point is that part of our globe has decreased, like customer service and all these other things, and people caring about what they do. It's like it has gone downhill since the pandemic. Huge. And I mean, it's not just everywhere. Like I at the hospital yesterday, the awesome people, amazing people, really make you feel comfortable because you're going through something that is hugely scary. And we're having conversations with them. We're like, man, you guys are staffed pretty good. They're like, no, we're understaffed like you wouldn't believe. And people need to start caring for other people and looking out and all this. And they go, I go, well, you wouldn't know it. And she's like, thank you. I really do appreciate that. And I'm like, I make it a point, and Christine makes it a point to say, thank you so much for just, being so kind, so generous, so giving, and we really appreciate it. And then that goes like leaps and bounds, but everywhere. I mean, you look at the issues at the airport with luggage and all that, like all of it. It's just globally there's this fracturedness of customer service. It's crazy. Literally just showing up today, you're in the 10% club. Just to show up, you're in the 10% club. It's crazy. But and then if you actually do something, you're in the 5% club. And then if you do it with effort, energy, and excitement, you're in the 2% club. And if you do it consistently, you're in the 1% club. It's not rocket science. It's a pretty simple formula. You just got to do it. Dean, you said you got some data sets. I know we're running short on time.
Yeah, I think this is a good way to wrap up the show because shippers have been rebidding a lot of lanes. There's been a lot more talk about RFPs, longer term RFPs. And I'm sure some of those listening on the call have been actively involved in rebidding lanes because shippers are looking for lower rates. We're starting to see some data come into our system. So these are contract rates. Remember our bathtub analogy? Active rates in routing guides are like the temperature in the bathtub. New rates entering routing guides are like the temperature of the water coming out of the tap. So these are new rates that were negotiated in bids maybe 2 to 3 months ago. For the first time since May of 2020, replacement rates entering the bathtub have dropped. They're in the negative. Mm-hmm. Normally, every 2-week period, contract rates entering routing guides have been going up and up and up for the best part of maybe 7 quarters now. But for the first time since May 2020, there is some cooling. So new rates coming in based on prior tenders, prior RFPs, are dropping, which is a really significant data point for those thinking about where this market's heading. The other data, so I'll give you the stats behind it. In dry van, rates are up 1% in June, down about 0.5% so far this month. The biggest mover, though, is reefer. Refrigerated rates are dropping rapidly on the contract side. Active rates in the temp control market are down 1% versus June. But replacement rates coming in are 8% lower than June. So the reefer contract market is cooling off literally really rapidly.
So you know what would be interesting then, Dean, is to look at, and maybe this can be a conversation for next week, is to look at, because 2018 was really that benchmark year where carriers said like rates are finally where they need to be, right?
Right.
So maybe if we can for next week, look at 2018, look at the rates that you just had come in. Let's take fuel out of the equation because contract rates typically have a fuel surcharge applied to them. And let's see where we're at, because it'd be interesting to see that data live. Is that my head?
No, DJ.
It's DJ.
I think it's me. I think my internet going in and out.
So I don't know if y'all can hear it. Sorry if you can. And then see where those rates are actually, because I'm willing to bet even with the lowering of contract rates, they're still higher than 2018. Because I think in the last 2 years we've. Oh, it was DJ. It was DJ's audio. Yeah, DJ, it's your audio, buddy.
Yeah.
I'll just put him in the background until the thing calms down. No, DJ, it's your audio. That's crazy.
Am I still going crazy?
You can't even hear us. Yeah, it's your audio.
Just feedback.
So it'd be it's feedback somewhere. So it'd be interesting to see that, Dean. So maybe we can pull that up for next week.
Hey Dan and Dean, with these rates that are coming down, right, and they're doing the rebids, and you've got this tap water that's coming in with these lower rates. I can tell you right now, it's not sustainable, and they're going to go up in the short run. Okay, I can't predict when that short run is going to be, but there's all the effort, the time, the cost that's put into these RFPs for just a small bit of time are going to have to be revisited. That's why the long-term RFPs are not sustainable, because the volatility in the market, it's going to go up, and you're going to have to rehash it. I'm going through that right now with about 30 lanes, and we're having those conversations, and the rates are coming down. But I'm having that conversation with them, saying, I'll do what I can, but it's not sustainable, and we will have another conversation. It's going to happen.
Spot on.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Am I still having issues?
Okay. Yeah, you are. But I mean, a little bit better now, but yeah. So, okay, DJ, let's take us out of here, brother, before your microphone craps out.
Yeah, before we totally get crapped out of this, let me just close this out. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, as always. Thanks, Scott, for letting me know that I was clear, just feedback. And thank you, everybody, for it. Tyler, thank you for the question. I think we'll use that next week.
Great.
So I know Dean's going to use that. Dean, as always, thank you for joining us live and making this possible. Jeff,
thank you.
Thank you for filling in and coming on every other week as well. And Dan, thank you. Thank you to the audience for making this possible. Centurion Trucking, American Logistics, thank you for the sponsorship. And quote to take us out, guys: expect little from people, a lot from yourself. That's the secret.
Yeah. That's kind of the theme that we had going at the beginning of this conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Centurion Trucking, our motto is people before profit. Today's market requires more transparency, consistency, and focus on what our clients need to win. Centurion Trucking and American Logistics are poised to help their clients achieve and surpass their targets. If you're looking for a team that honors your needs, dreams, and aspirations, then get a hold of Daman at American Logistics or Centurion Trucking.